So, a very good afternoon, all, and thank you all for joining today's session. Welcome to yet another session here where we discuss how to nurture future voices of youth leading climate advocacy. So, this session amplifies the powerful voices of our youth in the critical discourse of climate action. It's very common that we see most of the climate discussions have been leading by our seniors or elder generations. We see there is a gap. Our youth are youth to step into this advocacy. The young people are then agents of change in different sections of society, and they should not be left in climate action. In fact, their voices should be increasingly heard, demanding the right to participate in the decisions made and also in the climate advocacy. So am I audible? I just wanted to check in a minute.
Yeah.
All right, all right. So, as we all know, young individuals build an exceptional ability to initiate transformative change, with their enthusiasm, creativity, like the digital connectivity, using the new technologies. All these things position them as a potential catalyst in the ongoing battle of climate change. And we personally believe that youth stepping into the climate advocacy and climate related discussions, bringing up with their demands and fighting for their climate justice would actually shape the policies in a better way. It will actually promote a lot of sustainable practices and even more in their lifestyles, their the upcoming generations. So understanding this importance and need for more youth to come into this awareness and advocacy fields, Sphere India, along with NAPSIPAC, like NDRG, is organizing this session, aiming with targeting youth to them more about climate advocacy, role of youth in climate advocacy, and also we have like two young climate activists on who are actually doing amazing work in this field to hear from them about it. So before getting into the section, I would like to quickly introduce our speakers who are experts in the field who are here. So starting with, we have Dr. Amita Singh here. She is a president of NDRG, an Asia Pacific Disaster Research Group, and former professor of administrative reforms and emergency governance at Center for Study of Law and Governance at JNU. She has also been founder chairperson of Special Center for Disaster Research and member secretary of Institutional Ethics Review Board at JNU. Her extensive career includes leadership roles in organizations like NAPSIPAC and collaborations with institutions worldwide. She has received prestigious awards, including the 2014 Bangladesh Nawab Bahadur Said Nawab Ali Chowdhury National Award. Notably, she is an advocate for habitat rights and leads the organization Walk for Animals and Habitat efforts. We welcome you to the session now. We are privileged to have you here. Moving on, we have our Sumit Vadera, who is a professor and dean of Supra School of Planning and Architecture. He is not only an accomplished architect and urban planner, but also a dedicated advocate for environmental stability and youth development. With expertise in architectural design, sound planning, and real estate advisory services, he has excelled in various domains, contributing significantly to economic and planning assessment of policies. His commitment to education, development, and innovative growth mechanism is evident in his role as an educationist. He has also coordinated seminars on energy efficiency and sustainable development, showcasing his dedication to environmental concerns and youth education. Moreover, he has successfully led consulting advisory projects focusing on social and urban development, further highlighting his commitment to creating a sustainable future. We welcome you also to the session, sir. Moving on, we have Dr. Mohit Sharma, who is a senior assistant professor in Department of Public Policy and Public Administration at the Central University of Jammu. With a strong academic background, including an MA in Public Administration from Himachal Pradesh University and an MPhil in Public Administration, he brings a wealth of knowledge to his role. Driven by passion for administrative thought and cooperative governance, he actively engages with youth to promote climate resilience and advocacy. His dedication to both academia and youth involvement makes him a dynamic force in the field of public policy and administration. Thank you so much for joining. We are privileged to have you also, sir. Moving on, introducing our two young climate activists, starting with Dr. Gaurika Chak, who has completed her PhD in Law and Governance from Center for Study of Law and Governance, JNU. She is presently teaching at the Department of Humanities and Social Science at JP Institute of Information Technology, Noida. She has published papers on various issues of disaster and land governance in various international and national journals. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Gaurika. And also we have Ms. Prisha Kumar. She is the youngest member to serve in the global coordination team of the United Nations Sustainable Consumption and Production Group. Alongside pursuing her bachelor's honors in political science and economics from Dolat Ram College, University of Delhi. She has experience working globally on environmental policy and its intersections. At 18, she is the youngest delegate to address the fourth high-level global sessions in United Nations Science Policy and Business Forum in Stockholm, Sweden on reimagining multilateralism. She has also co-authored important policy papers, including the Global Youth Policy Paper, which was recognized in an official outcomes of United Nations Stockholm Plus 50 International Meeting. She is also a co-founder of ICPS Institute of Climate Policy Solutions, a youth-led global think tank launched at COP27 Sharm el-Sheikh to promote capacity building of youth, especially in the global south, and to support policy solutions. We're also very happy to have you, Prisha. So we have all our speakers
Hello.
here lined up. Anyways, without any further delay, we would like to start the session and hear from our speakers. So, beginning with, I would like to invite with who is a professor and dean of the Paris School of Planning and Architecture. Like, how do you think the young individuals recognize the urgency of climate change and the impact it can have, will have on a future? And also, what are some of the effective ways for young people to begin their journey as a climate activist? We know that not a lot of young people are currently involved in climate activism. So, over to you, sir.
Yeah, hi. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. First of all, a very good afternoon to all the dignitaries, all the experts, Mrs. Amita Singh ji and Mohit Sharma ji, along with all the other attendees and participants. Uh, First of all, I would really like to congratulate for taking up such a crucial topic at this point in time wherein things going around across the country substantiate talking about this topic, and that too advocacy by the youth in the climate resilient, or I would say considering climate change as one of the major concern points to talk about. This is something a very welcome step. As far as this aspect is concerned and the involvement of the youth is concerned, we all are very much aware that what is happening in India, and very close by to the area where I am sitting, Shimla or Himachal Pradesh area, or I would say the mountain belt, is actually experiencing the wrath of nature in the truest form, wherein innocent people, property, a lot of development work already incorporated has actually vanished from the surface. And all this is very much related to the climatic changes that we are experiencing. Uh, the involvement of the young professionals, or I would say the young minds, is a step towards understanding the issue in the righteous manner, I would say. As an academician, when we work and we talk about with the and interact with the students, we tend to find that they do understand this aspect, because it is a lot about talking about this aspect is going around across the globe. though it was happening in bits and pieces. And now it has become a serious concern because the repercussions are now in front of us. Earlier, it was just a mere topic that everyone was talking about, wherein nobody knew the resultants, and the resultants had a very long timeline to talk about, 2050, 2035. And when anything is far off the timeline, the gravity of that particular situation, the repercussions, and their, I would say, the impact scope is not understood. But as of now, this aspect is lot talked about, and young activists play a very important role in creating human habitation, I would say, because every place, whether it is mountains or plains, wherever we are experiencing any kind of natural, uh, I would say, disaster, there are reasons for that, and these young professionals, they are pretty aligned with it. Even at the academic domain, we tend to sensitize them towards the importance of such issues and how these things go about. So it's a very important aspect to think human settlements in a manner wherein to make them resilient not only towards the changing paradigm of human expectations and desires, but actually to the changing requirement and the utilization of the resources also. And when we talk about resources, natural resources are on the top of it, because everybody can talk about a lot of resources, but nothing can be done about a non-renewable one, or a one which takes a lifetime to actually get into shape wherein it can be utilized. And as an academician, as an architect, wherein the client interaction is very high, as a planner, wherein a lot of work we do is only for the human settlement, for the community, for the people, uh, as the end user, developing a lot of cities, it becomes all the more responsibility for all the stakeholders, including us, to make the youth be part of, to understand that developments come at a cost. So they have to be judicious, they have to be optimum, and at the same time, they have to be a lot of respecting the natural topography, the natural features, natural resources that are available. And as this particular seminar, right, or the interaction live we have, that we are talking about the future voices. And yes, youth can are the future voices, because they are the ones who have very recently understood and experienced the wrath of nature and the repercussions of untimely, unaccounted developments that are going around. And now there is an awakening wherein every professional who is attached with human societies, who is attached with communities, is talking about to work out some practical solutions so that this particular thing can actually end. So I hope this is something which answers to your question to begin with. Maybe other panelists will add on to what their perspective of youth involvement comes up in this particular aspect. For me, it is the future and a very important aspect of uh, trying to motivate people. I talk about one thing which I have found very important when you are involving youths, to make them understand that for any particular development, or to make the society aware of any particular issue, one thing which is very important is communication and capacity building. Because the major uh, hit that we as developing nations are experiencing is because people take it very casually, on two basic reasons. Number one, they do not relate to these particular aspects, so they don't tend to understand the gravity of these situations and what is there in the store. And the second thing is the communication part of it. It cannot merely be a small act of some maybe a webinar or a seminar being done, because at the end of it, the stakeholder who is effective, who is affected, and at the end of the day who will be experiencing all this, is on a larger content, is not uh, in line, or is not getting the opportunity to hear to these seminars and webinars. So communication of this trickled down to the bottom last person of the society is one of the biggest thing which needs to be done. And that's why capacity building at the lowest strata or lowest level of organizational behavior is one of the solutions, wherein the young students, young professionals can play a very important role. That particular segment of stakeholders have been in, I would say it is not utilized to its optimum level, because this is something wherein the schools, the colleges, the universities, they hold a massive amount of youngsters and a population size, which can actually trickle down this information with all its honesty to the stakeholders or the people who are actually on the ground, who are not aware of what is going on and what the think tank is actually talking about.
Thank you so much, sir. Like rightly said, a lot of youth does not like maybe fail to understand the urgency because they are not directly involved to this many of the disasters that are happening. And in that way, as you again rightly said, capacity building or directly communicating the urgency right from the school is one of the most effective way. How can we, translate this urgency to the young individuals? Thank you so much for sharing. We'll again come back with you once we hear from the other speakers for a common discussion. So I would like to quickly move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Mohit Sharma. Uh, Sir, can you share a bit about the especially the topic of climate advocacy? So we talked about how urgent it's for you to come into it. What is exactly is climate advocacy and how it is crucial for our current environmental context? And also, if you could share, some examples of some climate advocacy efforts that actually could bring a positive change. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I'm audible, Anna.
Yes, I can see.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, especially Professor Amita, Professor Vadera, Dr. Gaurika, Prisha. And thanks, Fair India, who gave me this opportunity. I will try to wrap up my thing in few minutes, as the time allotted was less. Uh, this topic itself requires a huge amount of time. I think a little seminar or thing won't do justice. But I like to put my perspective and share with the fellow colleagues over here. Can I share a PPT? I have a little PPT. Can I share it?
Yeah, yes, sir. You should be able to.
Yeah, just wait. No. Just wait. Just for a second. Where's the PPT? Yeah. I'm trying to share. Just give me a minute. Some glitch over here, I believe.
You can also send it over to me. If you find it difficult, I can also share it.
It was there. I know. Just wait. Just wait. It's there. I think. Yeah. Is it there?
Yes, we can
Yeah.
see it.
So, yeah. So I will be discussing these are little pointers which I want to discuss. What the key areas which can be explored by the youth. And as Professor Vadera already discussed, I incidentally, I hail from Shimla myself, and unfortunate instances which has occurred in the last couple of months. Since July, predominantly August. So all the local wisdom, people, the riffraff, and everyone around is pointing out that two aspects of it. One is, of course, that it is human greed, which has breeded this kind of a situation, and climate change and deforestation, which has played havoc in the young fold mountains of Himalayas. That is predominant thing which has come in surface over in last couple of months. Besides, the governance has always been an issue. And a few days back, I was speaking to Professor Amita ma'am, and she told that this tragedy which has occurred in Shimla was probably building up last 30, 40 years. So what we have done. So I think the youth need to be sensitized about it and how they will take over this, and they need to be advocated about the requirements. And here I also want to add a little thing about a Chipko movement, which occurred way back in 70s, almost 50 years. And here, the Honorable Mr. Bahuguna, his contribution has to be understood, and it should be the kids, the young people should be aware of his effort, what he did to the hills of Garhwal. Coming back, so I have youth engagement and empowerment is very important. These are for education, innovation, intersectionality, global collaboration, policy advocacy, resilience, and adaptation. These are four, five, 6 points which I have, which I'm mentioning over here. So we need to be these young leaders to be engaged, and they should come up with the solution. They should be given the choice for they should the information, and they should equipped with the knowledge, so they can effectively percolate that knowledge to their peers, and sometimes even to the older generation. So nowadays, I think older young kids, as my experience is, they are more aware. So give them right kind of a incubation in right kind of a situation. They can be amazing advocate. I will come in with some example with national and international example. I have made up another slide. So the main thing which I'm interested at this point of a time as a policy student, we three things which are required in this environmental issue, this the realm of environmental situation. One is addressing issues like social justice, inequality, and economic stability, sustainability. So these three things go hand in hand, and one of them is missing. We lose entire purpose. So economic activity, economic just social justice, and sustainable growth. That's the mantra which I think should be advocated. And these the younger leaders, they need to be made aware about this. And that comes into the domain of this, what you call policy advocacy. So these people can influence decision making at a local, national, and various forums. So that's my understanding. And youth-led initiative that focus on building resilience, adapting to changing circumstances, and finding way to minimize harm in the vulnerable region. So, secondly, so this is what we should be. So these are the key factors, and these are the advocacy things which we have discussed. So I would like to exactly, it's urgent. The crises are urgent. They are just happening around the corner. It's not that we can wait for another 20 years from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. So I think it's time we have to immediately take action. We have to immediately bring our youth to the front of it. Then environmental degradation, as we have just seen, which has happened in Himachal, which is the recent example. Kashmir was in 2014. Uh, then of course Garhwal and Kumaon has been have worstly hit in recent past. Of course, the coastal areas. Then the impact of this impact, the health, the social and economic justice, and the publicness awareness has to be improved, and the global cooperation, which is the next thing, which should be the the carbon footprints of has to be reduced considerably. So these are four things. What it means, four or five things I want to say: raising the awareness, educating the public with the scientific reasons about the climatic change. Second, engaging the policymaker to adoption. See, now I give you an example of Shimla. Shimla, that is a real case study, an empirical thing which I have right now in my head, in my mind, I need to discuss. It was major failure of policy. The the ghettoization or the concretization of Shimla is the last thing could have happened. I think since it's my hometown, I have a deep roots to that particular place, but I still have never recommended ever anyone to visit Shimla. It is one of the ugliest place which has post-liberalization. 1991, Shimla or Himachal state or the on the highway, national highway. I think that is the most ugliest, most unesthetic structures which have come up. That reminds me, Professor Vadera, who is here. I read a book called Ayn Rand book. She wrote a book, Atlas Shrugged, and there was Fountainhead, which was a story of
Yeah.
this guy called. He was an architect by profession, and when he was commissioned a project which he eventually bombarded because he didn't like the aesthetics. So I vividly remember some characters of it. To he, then Hank Reedon. So it was one of those books. Dominic Francon, who was the protagonist. So how the feminine power was illustrated, though it was quintessentially a objectivist literature, but as far as my concern is that what we have done to hills, especially concretization of hills, is not at all advisable. So the young people should know about it, that spending a holiday in hills should be in tents, maybe some house guests, not in those concrete ugly hostels or hotels. Then community engagement, that comes part of community engagement. Then of course corporate responsibility. That is one of my area which I study. So corporate responsibility, the corporates, because they are the most who are shedding this uh, they have to reduce their carbon footprints actually. So uh, they have to behave in a manner in as a Vasudev Kutum, understand the philosophy word as one unit or an organization. Then obviously the grassroots mobilization, which I have some studies also conducted some studies how Panchayati Raj movements can help in this entire story. How can they help the youth of the villages? When we say youth, it has to be, we have to outreach to the hinterland, to the villages. So the thing has to come from that particular thing. Then I have another little slide which will some examples. International people who have uh, committed to this thing. So the Greta Thunberg, which is amazing. She did it when she's still there, and especially Friday to Future, which has which is closely working in India as well. So she was one hero. Then Zero Hour, which is again done by Jamie Mangolian in the United States. Sunrise Movement again in the United States. Vaishni Prakash, all these people, young kids, they are rival kids since I think they are early 20s and 30s, and they have done tremendous. They're doing tremendous job. Then we have this little girl from who must be 12 or 13 years right now. This Likpriya from Manipur, and she's from Manipur is in all bad news for the bad reasons, but she's from one of those tribes who had a gumption to take the government of India to the court. Then Ridhima Pandey is one of them. Then obvious the part of the young advocates Friday to Future. Then Shalini Kashyap. Uh, and then this champions of earth environment, Indian Youth Network. I remember, I think one of the Shalini Kantanya is a American filmmaker, but of Indian origin. She has made few movies which are worth mentioning. And worth see. I just last time when I was searching for, they're available on YouTube also. So they have. I think these are few things which these young kids, young people should be made aware of it. The contribution of these people who are doing it, and what can be done in practically what they can do. And with this, I will conclude my this climate advocacy is a very critical thing, which has to be, this thing has to be inculcated to the youth so that they can question the authorities, they can question the civil society, they can go and question back home. So it has to be, that's what my idea is all about. It's a quite long thing. I'm trying to do justice. Maybe in a Q&A, I may be able to convince if there are queries. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohit. You correctly said about uh, like I was mentioning, like you talked about how corporate responsibility. I was thinking currently a good proportion of India's youth is moving to corporate, and at a quite a early age they are moving into like the corporate world. And if we could tap them like towards climate advocacy, and at least even if they don't go forward raise an issue, if they themselves in their life make a change, it would be like a good effort. So thank you so
Yeah,
much
agree.
for sharing.
Thanks, Anna.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Moving on, we'll hear from Professor and Dr. Amita Singh. Ma'am, what I would like to ask is, um, like we know that in India there are a lot of seniors like you who are constantly raising voices against like various climate issues, maybe government or to corporate. And in that scenario, it's like there are situations where we we don't find much of answers or response. In that scenario, how do you think youth can play a role in it? And like how can, so if at all somebody is interested, what would be your advice, or like how they can start their climate advocacy journey, and what are some of the practical steps or resources that you would recommend to them?
That's right. Thank you, Hannah. Uh, I'm just going to get the demographic picture of the country uh, unfolding before us, which reveals a lot. There's not much to be said once you know the demography of especially different states, and we can have a little comparative view about the states to come to our conclusions about how youth can contribute and what is the situation, what is their role in decision making, what is their role in politics and as parliamentarians and decision makers. When United Nations started this whole understanding about youth, it had been closed earlier. 2009 onwards, this suddenly started, but actually the roots were sown in 1992 when the World Commission on Sustainable Development in Rio had established the fundamental principles of sustainable development. There were two principles which we can invoke here for our further discussion, which is the intragenerational equity and justice and intergenerational equity and justice. When we say intergeneration, then we say this is between the two generations, the youth and the elderly, and intrageneration, that within the generation who are living right now and consuming resources of the earth, what is happening amongst them in terms of equitable justice and distribution. So these two principles have been extremely important for coming down and doing the rest of our work on youth. Currently, 50% of the population of India is below 25. And considering that 1/5 of the world population comes in this frame. And now let's take up how many elderly people. Okay, one more, 65% below 35. So if we take under 35, which is youth, which is considered as youth, we have 65% of population in the country in that category of youth. So we can say the enormous challenge which comes to the decision makers. And in 2022, the parliamentarians in the world, if we look at the feature now, decisive people who are framing laws, formulating regulations for how the resources would be used in coming times. Under 35 category formed about 15 to 16%, which is not much, but considering the elderly people in parliament who are like saturated, driving out, kind of getting disinterested in it, or repetitive work which is going on. These 15 to 16% fresh entrants into the parliaments of the world were creating a furor. And we can see in 2010, when the Arab Spring took place and series of Arab awakening incidents took place, the demographic structure of the Arab awakening participants was under 35, almost 65 to 70% people. And this could be even more in some of the areas of Arab awakening, some areas in the Arab. So, that speaks about that the young want something and they are not very happy about what is happening and the way decisions are being taken in distributive justice of resources across the world. Then I come back home in India. We have about 356 million young people. Now let's take up 2 states. Very interesting if you really get to know about it. Bihar has the highest youth population, 58%, and the lowest literacy, which is 61%, which is lowest in the country. Kerala, which has the highest literacy level of 94% and more. Now, here we have a sharp fall by 21 in a decade, 2011 onwards, we see from 50+% of youth, it had fallen down to 36%. What a sharp fall in youth population. And it's going into the negative side of fertility. And on the other side, take up the elderly population, 60+ population, the rise of the elderly, the seniors, 5.1% to 17% in a decade. So we see that there is a great turbulence happening, and I'm glad that we are catching on to the turbulence pretty late, but well, still there is time in which we can retrofit the decision-making processes and formulate the strategies that we need to focus upon. So this, in Kerala, this has led to an epidemic kind of a situation in which there is a sharp fall in the workforce. Why? Because the young ones are not trained. The elderly people are no more in jobs. So where are you going to get the workforce from? You're going to get it from outside. So don't you think that women should be equal participants? So the new kind of population which we are seeing in the world, there ought to be no place for patriarchy. We cannot have women sitting at home because women are part of the youth. This new population that we are talking about does not have a very severe gender fall. And so we need to have all women in the workforce. But the women workforce is falling drastically as much as both the workforce is falling in states like Kerala, where the literacy rate is high and number of youth is on a fall. Serious problem. So, out of this demographic structure, we can say that issues like racism, like caste, like patriarchy, like speciesism, these have no place because we can't segregate people. Okay, you will not work. Then who will work? Where will the development come from? The development will come from when 100% youth participation is enabled. Bihar will be a serious disease if we do not educate each and everyone. It should be compulsory education, compulsory free education to everyone. And that is the place where we should be acting, and we are not acting in that direction. Second challenge which comes is that the diversity need to be understood, because all these youth are coming from different cultural backgrounds and we have no place for divisiveness. Anyone who talks about divisiveness, whether it's caste, it's religion or anything, is anti-India, because India will not grow. It will have a serious collapse in economic and social policies. Third, projects need to be identified where we can train youth as interns, and this should be in not only in the areas in the colleges and universities. the government projects which are coming from NHPC, NTPC, nuclear projects and all, which are considered to be very, very confidential. These are the places where youth need to be introduced and their skills need to come up, and this training should be as interns with some payment so that they learn the art of governance at that level, because we have no time. Third is the psychosocial resilience is not paid attention at all. People are lynching, they are killing, and there's this a serious crisis of caste, and there's a serious crisis of what you eat, what you don't eat. All these problems are like nibbling through development. And this is weakening our psychosocial resilience, because as parents do, so children have to follow. And there are more young people being lynched and killed than old people. So this is psychosocial resilience should be a subject in school, and every school must compulsorily have a counselor. And fourth is the mental health. We have not paid much attention to mental health, and that is where we need to focus upon. With this, I end up this little scattering of ideas about you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, the presentation, ma'am. It actually touched upon quite interesting topics, which I think we would come back again, like what's the open discussion part. So I would like to quickly move on to Dr. Gaurika. She also mentioned that she had to leave at 4. So Dr. Gaurika, as a representative of youth climate advocates, how has your journey been like? Is there any projects or campaigns that you led, and how was your experience? And also, you are from the law and governance background. We would like to hear from you as a climate advocate about climate.
Sure. Thank you so much, Hannah. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear.
First of all, my congratulations to the organizers for organizing such a timely event on, on this very important topic. So in this age, we are talking about climate age. We are talking about natural disasters. In fact, climate change has become a fashionable term. And now with extreme events and unprecedented rise in natural disasters, what we are facing now is not climate change, but we are actually in the age of climate emergency. The sooner we accept this, shift, this unprecedented shift from climate change to climate disaster, climate emergency, the better we'll be able to realize our focus and energy in combating the damage posed by climate change and becoming more resilient. So in this age of climate emergency, the youth, because in this webinar we are focusing on the youth. So the youth, especially in the age group of 15 to 24 years, can play an important role and can be the catalyst of change. So if we look at the statistics of youth population all over the world, there are 1.2 billion young people accounting for 16% of the global population. By 2030, which is also the target for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the percentage of youth population is expected to grow by 7% to nearly 1.3 billion. And Professor Amita Singh has already touched upon the demographic statistics of India, so I'll just leave that part. So I'll concentrate my presentation on 3 important points and how we can achieve disaster risk reduction for the child and the youth. So coming first to the first point which I want to mention is the children and youth rights, the child and youth rights. So in international law, there is a convention, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, an international human rights convention that came into force in the year 1990, and this has been ratified by 193 countries. There are 4 key, rubrics, the 4 key principles of this convention. Number 1 is non-discrimination, Article 2 of this convention. Number 2 is best interest of the child, Article 3. Third is survival and development. And the last one is child participation, which is Article 12. Now, the fundamental question, why we are discussing what has climate change adaptation got to do with child rights? It is important to understand that children and youth are born with fundamental freedoms and inherent human rights. This International Convention on the Rights of Child has been ratified by 193 countries, as I just mentioned, but millions of children exist without even their most basic rights to survival. There is inherent vulnerability, challenges of poverty, which inhibit the growth of children and youth. This means that children and youth are less well equipped to cope with and adapt to the change brought about by climate change. Climate change increase has an impact on children's right to life, education, health, nutrition. Climate change also results in migration, displacement, thus making the youth of our globe more susceptible to sexual abuse and child trafficking. Now let me come to the Indian context. India ratified this convention on 11 December 1992. If we talk about the rights of children, there are an umpteen number of rights mentioned in our fundamental rights. Article 21A, right to education, which came up through the 86 Constitutional Amendment Act, which talks about providing education to children, especially in the age group of 6 to 14 years. We also have Article 23 and 24 of fundamental rights that talks about protection from trafficking and hazardous employment. But when we look at the impact of disasters, it has no boundaries. Disasters has no boundaries. It especially affects the marginalized and the vulnerable population who are at the peripheries, who are at the margins. So if you look at child trafficking, for example, if you look at child trafficking statistics in India, as per the data from the National Crime Records Bureau, 8 children were trafficked every year in India in 2021 for various issues like for labor, for begging, for sexual exploitation. Though if you look at the statistic, it is gradually coming down. Like in 2018, there were 2,834 cases. In 2019, there were 2,914 cases, and now in 2020, we have 2,222 cases. So though we can say that gradually the graph is coming down, but there are various cases which often go unreported due to lack of awareness, due to reluctance of families to seek police help, or because of socio-economic deprivation. Also, there are very few cases which are reported. Now, one child goes missing every 8 minutes in India. This is the statistics which is there, and it is there on the government's portal. Recently, just a week ago, while I was reading Indian Express newspaper, there was a news in Indian Express about the landslide which happened in the Raigad district of Maharashtra, in which many children have lost their parents. They have become orphans, and now the survivors who are left, they're mostly children. Their parents have gone, and they're now crammed up in makeshift arrangements in camps. And now in the camps with no education, they are just spending their time watching videos, playing games. So this is this is the future of our youth. This is the future of our children. So therefore, the first point which I'm trying to make is that we need to strengthen the rights of our children. The second important point which I want to make is, how do we implement the Sendai framework for DRR, especially for the children and the youth? It is important to integrate the 4 priorities of action as it is highlighted in the Sendai framework of action, with child-centered disaster risk reduction. So we should have participatory planning, programming that aims to reduce children's vulnerabilities to disaster risk. See, children and youth, they have special needs and are disproportionately affected by disasters. So therefore, it is important to invest in children's health, education, nutrition, which not only will result in the development in their development and well-being, but is also equally important for increasing the resilience of communities to withstand shocks and crises. And the third point and the last point which I want to make, that how can educational institutions can be the catalyst for change. So in this, we need to bring about schools, colleges, universities, because they have a social obligation towards the children and the youth. So in this, we need not only increase the sensitivity of children, but we also need to sensitize the teachers. We also need to sensitize the those who are actually inculcating the values in children. So with this, I'll just end. I hope I was well in time.
Yes, you were. Thank you so much, Dr. Borika. Like, you specially mentioned, the different areas where climate advocacy is needed, especially when we talk about rights and how can education institutions, act upon it, how to make them more aware. So I understand the correlations of, once people understand the rights they have, they can act upon, like when it is being violated. And it's definitely so that many of the disasters put children in a very vulnerable situation where, like, we can even see that in the example that you told, and also we could see in Manipur where a lot of children are moved into camps. What they do in the time where they have are supposed to have a normal education, and what they are doing currently is quite devastating. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Moving on, we'll have a last speaker who is again a young activist, Trisha. Trisha, we would also like to hear from your experience. You have also done a lot of interesting work in advocacy and in policy related activities. So, why do you think the youth voices and participation is important and has an impact, and it impacts the progress on climate action agenda on policy areas?
Thank you so much, and it is a pleasure to join this conversation here. And it is a very important topic because in India has the world's largest youth population, and when we're talking about policy, youth engagement, and especially in climate policy, youth engagement is crucial, and it is like the backbone of forming a resilient, more sensitive, and more impactful policy making and decision making for the future. Because young people are the biggest stakeholder of climate change and the triple planetary crisis. And young people across the world have already been taking lead initiative in climate action, in developing research, in promoting their work in various avenues and building a momentum towards a more sustainable environment, to a more sustainable and resilient future with adaptation and other roles. But there is very little engagement of young people in India. I feel that the biggest challenges would also be that there is very limited avenues for capacity building. It is largely driven by self-initiative, or it is self-funded. There is very limited resources available, and often a lot we usually have to manage our studies or other avenues we are working on along with this advocacy, and that sort of restricts the possibilities and the number of people who could actually really wish to engage, but they are not aware of how to engage, or what's the process, how they can build their capacity or learn more about what they're interested in. So like these were also some of the challenges which I faced myself, and that is why last year I launched the Institute of Climate Policy Solutions, which would be focusing on building policy solutions and building capacity among the young people in the global south to be able to participate meaningfully, to be aware and build a capacity to how they can engage and contribute to meaningful processes. And we have big testimonies like the Stockholm Plus 50, or when we're talking about the high level political forum on SDG sustainable development goals. Young people's participation has significantly impacted and sort of driven the negotiations by making sure that the policies which are being undertaken are sensitive of the times, of the critical nature of the matter which is being discussed, which is the climate change, the triple planetary crisis, and also bring in the urgency which is very crucial to have in the decision making spaces. And really young people's engagement in India, because India has the largest youth population, as I mentioned, and as my fellow counterparts also mentioned, fellow panelists. So they, like young people can contribute in the entire full life cycle of policy process, in the formulation, in the decision making, or in the evaluation, and especially in the accountability aspect. And as the largest stakeholder, it is very important to engage and make young people aware, build their capacity so that they have avenues and they know that they can contribute. And many people have already done that, but that is very limited compared to the potential it could reach or the impact which it could have.
Thank you so much, Putra. And like at this moment, I would like to ask you something. Like, you have been to global stages and you have met other young climate activists like you. So, hearing from their experience, what do you think India can offer? You have definitely mentioned a lot of challenges, but I'm just curious, have you heard any resources or anything that they have in their countries which their governments provide, like as like an incentive or encouraging them to for resources or anything from India like that we can actually work for.
Yes, that's a very good question. And I have met a lot of people from different countries who have been engaging, and I am very happy to know that in a lot of countries, including Sweden and Kenya, they have an entire process set in their framework of policy processes to engage young people. And young people are also included in the national delegations to various climate meetings, so that the young people are represented, and their points are also being given the value, because as they are the major stakeholders. And there is a lot of capacity building venues also in different countries. For example, from a very young age, there is an entire capacity building process established, like workshops which are actively held and which are catered to the specific situation of the geographical needs of that particular region. And I think those are the, like, two models which I personally find very good, and which is very possibly in being able to be implemented in India as well. And I think the Indian population and the young people in India are very active and they are very motivated, but they really need the guidance and the capacity building to actually be able to contribute to the potential they can do that. So those would be the two very interesting things which I noticed and which we could actually implement in India as well. And also,
Definitely.
like, other than these things which are already happening in different countries, but one thing which I find myself thinking that would really improve the situation of engagement of young people would be creating an environment, a space which is very inquisitive, which has critical thinking, which appreciates the initiative of young people, because not always do they need capacity building. Many people have already undertaken many initiatives and research projects which are very scalable, which promise a very beautiful future ahead. But a supportive environment, no matter where they are, but if they are driven enough to take the initiative, an environment which can help them, which can support them, not necessarily through a mechanized institutional process, but even the environment would also be a very uh, very nice thing to be fostered in future.
Definitely, Tushar. Thank you so much for sharing that. We hope we can eventually have some of this as a reality in India. So we have come almost to an end of the session. Is there any questions from the panelists or from the audience? We are happy to hear. You can even put it up in the chat box, or if not, I would like to ask this one. It was just, I kept on having this question when Trisha was talking. So she was talking from a youth perspective, from what, like, we hear from other country delegates that she might have seen during these global conferences. So, like, to other panelists, what do you think, like, as a government or like as an NGO or being in the academic field, that we can do to encourage more youth into climate advocacy? I would also like to put in a small, like a reality, like like something that I have personally observed. So Fisher was talking about giving a chance for youth to come in into the planning. So we all know that in the rural areas we have the ward sabhas which is happening within the small area, and I have personally tried to bring in a lot of youth in my like locality to come to the ward sabha to demand for a lot of things like whatever is happening. But then we have seen that youth are not, they don't they're like not that interested to come into an advocacy space. They feel like it's more like an older people job, and they are not they don't have to step into all this climate related issues. So what do you think that, as somebody who holds how big it is, like being in an academic or NGO or a development humanitarian space, what can we do to encourage more youth, as what incentives can we give to encourage more into a climate space? Anyone if you would like to answer that question.
Well, that's the major concern which is building up. So, Hannah, even though we need to involve a lot of youth into activities, the youth would only get involved in which they are interested. So, interests are not to be created, but interests are to be conserved. So that means everyone must have a sort of a freedom to do what they wish to do. And there shouldn't be enough, there shouldn't be obstructive forces around youth. And we already have a lot of obstruction coming in the growth of youth, in the manner in which the unions, student unions within the colleges and universities are being suppressed. And that is one place where you have the best training for youth. That's a different thing, that the university administration has not been able to handle these unions and involve them into participatory governance, because nobody wants transparency when it comes to that. So this is a major problem, not just amongst the youth, this is also about the elderly people. So we need to find some way out on that. Participation, communication is one of the crucial points of this, which should be outside the WhatsApping. Not just, but WhatsApping is a first step, which is also a very important step to bring people together.
Besides, ma'am, I think a certain kind of a culture need to be inculcated. As there's a question also, the culture is it's only the education institution cannot play a role. I think civil society or back home also, as I mentioned earlier, the especially about sustainability. I tell we if we find example during our when we were kids, my grandparents and something like that, there was a huge they used to be preaching us about sustainable consumption, which I think nowadays in the times of Amazon Prime, Flipkart, and all, just missing. I've seen little kids going for a binge, shopping around and nuclear families promoting it up. That is just happening around us, man. So I think the family needs to, as a unit, needs to play a formidable role in this. This institution cannot play the only role. I think it is a collective effort which is required, as far as my understanding of a social scenario.
Okay. Rishabh,
And
you
I
want-
would like to add slightly to it. My Since it was pointed out in the question also that educational institutions might play a very important role into this. Sensitization is a very important factor of human psychology. If you even, as ma'am Amita ma'am also pointed out, if you go back to the history and if you try to deliberate upon it, you will find that whatever movements have ever taken place, the idea has been of relatability to that particular aspect, and somebody taking the lead, creating that interrelationship with that activity, and then enrichment of the idea, and then only that particular thing converted into a mass movement or a mass advocacy format. Otherwise, in bits and pieces or at individual levels, there has never been success. We are talking about climate advocacy, many thanks to people like Greta Thunberg, who took the center stage and came this, everything came from media. It was transmitted to the general public, wherein people started talking about climate advocacy, trying to work around it and try to understand what exactly is happening. Otherwise, it was an individual discussion. At the educational level, yes, the basic and the most important aspect is to create and make the students feel the relatability to a certain factor. As per the human psychology, any person who is maybe a inhabitant of hilly towns would relate much more compared to a guy who's staying in the plains. So that kind of relatability is still, there is lackness. There is an idea of relationship creation is lacking amongst the youth. That idea of relatability needs to be created, and then only they would transmit this idea from one person to the other, and a linkage can be created wherein you can actually think about creating mass awareness, mass movement, and bringing in a lot of youths into it. uh, there is always something like a leader. We always had Mahatma Gandhi to lead the non-violence movement. We find him the front torch bearer. There is always a requirement of a torch bearer to move ahead. Many times it starts alone, but the minute the relation and the link is created with the youth, that why that person is part to it and what is the benefit that he or she is going to get, that's a human instinct. Nobody works without any benefit. So what is the return that is coming up? Once the idea is communicated in the truest form, you will automatically find a lot of youth trying to get into it. And that is what we have been seeing across the globe. People are coming together for various reasons, but the idea is there has to be a common purpose, and they have to be aware of what exactly is the common purpose and what is the return out of it. But yes, youth is the answer to each and every problem that we are currently talking about. So that's my take on it.
Thank you so much, Prisha. You wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you. I just quickly wanted to add that indeed I agree that it is a very important aspect is culture, and that in India the culture of advocacy, the culture of critical thinking is not very appreciated or encouraged or promoted, and that is something which needs to develop, and I think that is very possible and easily done. But another thing, one of the ways in which that could be done is recognition and appreciation, because in India I am personally aware of many young people doing amazing initiatives, but they don't people are not even aware about them, let alone media. And these young people, like, we are recognized in different countries, we are recognized in United Nations, at United States of America, or in Europe, but that is in other countries. But in India there is very little recognition or appreciation of the work that young people are doing towards climate action and changing, fostering a more sustainable future as a whole. And there is also a very tricky thing of changing narratives and greenwashing, where these narratives are very easily manipulated to support the agenda for a certain cause. And for example, greenwashing has been a very major problem when we look, even when we're looking at COPs or other avenues. So it is something which could be tackled through capacity building, through meaningful education, training, and an environment which really appreciates and recognizes the efforts which people are already putting in spite of the challenges. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Prisha, for bringing that point up. So I believe we have heard from all of the speakers, and also I don't think we have any questions left. And also, we have gone a bit overboard in time. So anyway, it was a wonderful session indeed. Like, uh, in terms to understand the role of climate advocacy and how youth can step into it. We heard some experts and also from some of the youth delegates themselves on what are the challenges that they face, what are some of the actions that they do, and what are some of the incentives. So personally, I feel that was one of the best takeaways from this. So what are the things that we can focus more on so that we can incentivize or encourage more youth into the climate advocacy. It was wonderful hearing from you all. Thank you so much for your time. And I know all of you are quite busy with your personal schedules, but thank you so much for your time. We hope that this webinar comes out best, and we hope that all our takeaways would be used by, stations and their projects, and so that more youth can be targeted and more of them, as Trisha said, could be recognized. And, we really acknowledge their acts so that more of them are encouraged to do so. Anyway, thank you so much for all the speakers and also the participants who stayed with us. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know, and we'll be addressing them. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll be sharing a feedback link quite after the session. So feel free to send your feedbacks to us like that also. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Amita, Mohit sir, and Sumit sir, and also Fisher. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Hannah. It was a pleasure to join in. Bye, everyone.
Same.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.